well today. Today what we're going to talk about is we're really going to go into detail on why you may not feel well even though you're utilizing a replacement hormone or even when your labs look normal. This is a very, very common problem that we see in clinical practice where labs may look fine but the person still doesn't feel well, or where they're taking a hormone or something that's supposed to be helping support their symptoms and their chemistry, but they still feel bad. And this is a really important concept for you guys to understand, because the quantity of the hormones that you're taking or the medications that you're taking, they may not affect all the physiology that you may need to have addressed in order to support you feeling well. Okay, it's really important to understand that. So when we're talking about the thyroid as an example, we know that this entire process of hormone production has many steps, and that it's not just the quantity of the hormone that we have to take into consideration. So we have to look at the brain, we have to look at how the brain, the central structures in the brain signal the pituitary gland, which is another structure in the brain that produces hormones, and how those brain structures work to signal the thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. Then once the hormone's produced, it has to be carried through the body, and there's places where that can break down. And then when the hormone gets to the cells of the body where it's utilized, there are places where the cell sensitivity to the hormone can break down. And then all of that together has to then signal back to the brain so that the brain can raise and lower its signaling of the thyroid to produce the hormone, which is called a feedback loop. Okay? So there are all these places that can break down. The thyroid hormone quantity by itself is oftentimes not enough. And there are a lot of other things that we need to support and that we can support dietarily, nutritionally, and sometimes we have to do very in-depth testing to be very specific as to what's going on, because we can have problems like infections, food sensitivities that we may not be able to really improve without testing. There may be environmental chemicals that your body's reacting to that's influencing some of this. And there may be gene or genetic uniquenesses that we have to consider. So those are all things that we want to look at. But let's go ahead and talk about how this process works so that you can have a better idea of what you might need to consider in order to get your health as optimal as you can, okay? So why you have to consider more than hormone levels. So the main thing that I want to start by talking about is that there are four different things that we want to consider when we're looking at hormone physiology as a whole. Not just the thyroid, but hormone physiology as a whole. So number one, the first thing that we have to check for is, do we have adequate, what guys? Starts with a P. Do we have adequate production, right? So if we're talking about the thyroid, do we have adequate T4 and T3 levels? And so your doctor, what they primarily do is they say, okay, you come in, you have fatigue, brain fog, you're gaining weight, you don't feel well, maybe you're constipated too, you're depressed. So they say, okay, let's check your thyroid. So what are they going to check? They're going to check TSH, right? They're going to look at, and let's just write it down here. So they're going to check your TSH levels, right? And if your TSH level's high, then they think that your thyroid hormone, primarily your T4, is low, because these are inverse relationship. The one goes up, one goes down. That's how the feedback loop works. So the brain is signaling the pituitary gland to make TSH, and then the T4 is the primary hormone produced by your thyroid, okay, about 93%. So they look at TSH. A lot of times they don't check these because, if the feedback loop is working properly, TSH tells them what they need to know. So they assess production that way. And then what they may do is say, if your TSH is above the lab range, which is typically 4.5, right, 4.5, TSH is above 4.5, and they're going to say, your thyroid hormone's low, let's give you a thyroid hormone replacement. In most cases, that's going to be a synthetic T4, which is designed to bring up your T4 levels, and if T4 comes up, then TSH should go down, because remember, they're inverse. It's like a seesaw, right? One goes up, the other goes down. And what they're looking for is a balance. So they're trying to bring the TSH down, and they use TSH as a way to monitor and indirectly monitor the thyroid hormone levels. So they're looking at production, right? Production. And so once they get production balanced, if they can, sometimes they can't get it balanced very well. And that's usually a pretty clear sign that there's something else going on. Most commonly we find that Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, an autoimmune thyroid condition, is driving this process and this fluctuation and spike and dip in the hormones. That's very commonly what we see. If we can work on dampening that autoimmune process, which is what we work with people to do, then oftentimes they can better regulate and identify the body's need for hormone. Okay, so we work on the factors that drive the autoimmune process that causes it to fluctuate. But that's production. So if production is right, if production's good, then they say, okay, everything looks good, but and you might sit there and say, well, I still don't feel well. You might feel some better, you might feel worse, you might feel no different. And we hear this all the time, and that's because production is only one piece of the puzzle, right? You're only talking about the quantity. What about the transportation through the body? What about conversion if they give you a synthetic T4 to T3, which is what your body needs? You know, what about that? What about the sensitivity of the hormone at the cell? What about detoxification? Might you be converting too much of this hormone into a form called reverse T3 that's blocking your body's ability to use the hormones? Those are all possibilities that, those are things that we really look at. We go beyond the quantity, and we try to help you figure out and look at the rest of the physiology. But it's really important that you are having the quantity checked and assessed, and that that's being monitored. But there's a lot of other physiology that may be holding you back from having optimal health. So what's the second thing we really want to look at, guys? The next thing we want to look at is transport. Can you transport the hormone? So let's say that you go to your doctor and the thyroid hormone is good, right? They've measured it and they've given you a thyroid hormone replacement, and your TSH is normal. Okay, it's normal. It's good, right? So they're saying, well, you know what? Your thyroid looks good. It must not be your thyroid. Well, what about transportation? So transportation, and really, I want to go through these with you guys. Transportation, you'll find often that it can be disrupted with there are lots of different categories of things that can influence this. Different medications can affect your body's ability to properly and efficiently transport your thyroid hormone through the bloodstream. Hormones can affect transport. One of the things that we very commonly see is that estrogen and estrogens, when they're at higher levels, can decrease the body's ability to transport and carry the hormone efficiently, your thyroid hormone. And you end up having what we call like an estrogen pattern, where a lot of the thyroid hormone is being held on to. I don't want to get too deep in the physiology. I want to give you an overall concept here. And this creates problems with transport. So you're not able to get the hormone where it needs and have the body utilize it. Different toxins can impact this transportation process. Some of them can mimic estrogens and drive a lot of other processes. There are lots of places that transport itself can break down. Now, this can impact hormone levels and what we call binding proteins. Now, I don't want to get too technical because we don't have time to go into every one of these, but I want to give you an overall assessment. So transportation has to be considered. We see this very frequently happen with people where transportation is inefficient, and when we work to improve this, the person feels better because they're actually able to have better delivery of the hormones throughout the body. Now, production, one thing I want to jump back to production and just say, broken feedback loops, right? So the thing I talked about where the hormone one goes up, one goes down, that's a feedback system. These feedback loops can be, they can be broken. Like literally you do not get the response or the adjustment by the body when the hormones go up and down. And there are various reasons that the feedback loops can be broken. You can also have antibody or autoimmune drivers of decreased production, whether it be Hashimoto's or whether it be brain-based mechanisms where you're not getting good signaling due to antibody and immune reactions, okay? So this autoimmunity can absolutely affect production. Nutrient or lack of nutrients needed for hormone production and manufacturing of hormones is an absolute possibility. Medications, toxins can all be inhibitory. They can actually, we know that there are a lot of environmental compounds that can decrease production of a lot of your hormones and interfere with them. So that's really important from a production perspective. But let's talk about our third thing that we have to consider when we're looking at why you might not feel well, even though your labs look good, or you're taking a hormone that should help you. So why you might not feel well. The next thing we have to consider is sensitivity. Okay, sensitivity. So are the cells of your body sensitive to your hormones? And when we talk about hormones and sensitivity, the thing that I really want you to understand, guys, is that every cell in your body has this layer. It's actually they call it a lipid. It's called a lipid bilayer, meaning two layers of fat. Now, on the outside of this cell, you have receptors. These receptors are like little docking stations for your hormones, and you have them for all your hormones. What happens is the thyroid hormone, whenever it comes in, it will come in, and let's say it's going to be a T shape, right? It should fit directly into this receptor, and when it fits into the receptor, it stimulates the physiological changes in the cell. Now, what can happen here is that there are a lot of things that can decrease the sensitivity of these receptors to the hormone. So they might not be able to attach, or they might attach but have less stimulatory effect, okay? So what's decreasing the sensitivity? Maybe you have the hormone there. Maybe the hormone's getting to the cell, but at the level of the cell, you don't have sensitivity. So there are a lot of things. This would be receptor binding. The hormone has to attach to drive the cell. So there are drugs, toxins can all affect this. Different types of chemicals can affect this sensitivity. Genetics, maybe there are genetic polymorphisms that can decrease receptor sensitivity. Hormones and nutrients that can also affect this. We see that inflammation is probably the most common thing that we see happens here. There's inflammation, systemic inflammation, so we're typically looking at CRP, which is C-reactive protein, and homocysteine, we'll abbreviate it HCY, cytokines. These are all things that will affect this receptor sensitivity. Nutrient issues, vitamin A deficiencies, all affect this and can affect your sensitivity. Now, also within this realm of sensitivity, if we're talking about the thyroid itself, remember that T4 is the primary hormone that's made by the gland, and that has to be converted into T3. So you can have poor conversion, and if you have problems with conversion, there are different medications and drugs that can affect and decrease conversion. There are endogenous hormones like cortisol. Cortisol is an endogenous, your body makes it. It's a stress hormone. It can decrease conversion. And you can see things like nutrient deficiencies that can decrease conversion. So all of these things can create problems for you. So that is sensitivity. Okay? Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. These are all reasons that you might not feel well, even though your hormone levels are normal and your labs look fine. Okay? This is a reason. So the next thing is detoxification, because guess what? Your body makes these hormones, or you're taking these hormones, but they have to be cleared out. If they're not cleared out, then they can actually, as your body is metabolizing them or partially metabolizing them, you can have these leftovers called metabolites that can literally attach themselves to the cells of your body, but they either have a very low effect or they have no effect. So what happens is they block the hormones that we want from attaching, and they create a lot of problems. Now, when we really look at the hormonal issues here as a potential problem, or I would say the most significant issue tends to be when estrogens aren't fully metabolized and cleared from the body. They make these metabolites that can have very dangerous effects on the body. So detoxification is a very important part that we have to consider. We have to consider production of the hormone. So is the quantity right? Transportation, can it get where it needs to go? Sensitivity, can the body actually use it? And then detoxification, once it's been utilized, once it's been used, can the body break it down and clear it? These are very, very important. So what affects detoxification? Drugs, medications can impact it. Genetic polymorphisms, gene uniquenesses can affect detoxification pathways. Nutrients that you may be lacking in can all affect it. So this is very important for us to consider. These are things that we have to look at. We have to make a conscious effort to be aware that these things can all make us feel bad, that it's not just the quantity that's important, okay? So guys, I hope that's helped you to better understand some of the things that you need to be considering if you're struggling with really improving your health and how you feel. You know, we have worked with people clinically for years looking at a lot of these issues and helping them put together very specific plans so that they can, you know, try to get their health back. Guys, if you're interested, I work with people around the world, across the country. We do distance consulting either via phone, Skype, or FaceTime. We help people get lab testing. We help people determine very specific dietary and nutritional plans that are very customized to them. Now, if that's not an option for you to get customized support, then what you may want to consider is going through and utilizing dietary changes and nutritional supplementation in combination with some lifestyle changes that can have very profound and positive effects on this. And what we've done is over the years of working with people, you know, we have figured out things that tend to work pretty well for people if they'll do, you know, if they want to do more of a trial and error approach, they can utilize some of the tools that we have observed to work very well for people, and they can implement that on their own. But if you want a very precise and customized plan for you, you want to get results faster, then typically you want to consider getting some assistance, okay? But if you would like to consider and like to know more about the types of approaches that we take, the dietary, the supplemental approaches, and the lifestyle approaches, then definitely check out hashimotosdoctor.com/TCS, where you can learn about our transformation community programs, because within our transformation community, guys, we have put together the resources, our program, our transformation, Hashimoto's transformation program, our detoxification program, which comes after that. We have our guidebook resources. So if you're trying to figure out what your labs look like and maybe where you are and see if you're being impacted from some of these things, then you need to check out our guidebooks. We have 9 labs required to understand your thyroid and a 29 lab tests you need that no one has ordered. We've got 2 guidebooks. Those are all part of our transformation community, and you can get access to all those things at one time and really start learning more specifically about what you need to do to impact some of these factors from a dietary, lifestyle, and temporary nutritional supplementation perspective. You can just go to hashimotosdoctor.com/TCS and you can learn all about it. You can join our community, you can get access to all these resources, and you can really start working on improving your health. So if you have any questions, guys, let us know. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you hanging out with me today, and I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Talk to you again very soon. Thanks.